Everybody loves a friendly competition, and that is exactly why I'm starting my new series, the TBR Tournament. I'm going to be putting my most anticipated reads off of my TBR up against one another to see who can be the final champion of the TBR Tournament. Since I'm going to be reading down my TBR anyways, which might I say, I'm currently down to 36 books and I'm pretty proud of that, I figured this would be a fun way to document this journey and share it with you guys. So let's go ahead and begin with our first 2 books of the TBR Tournament. The first book, as you guys already saw, that I'm going to be reading in today's video is The Women by Kristin Hannah. I did already take off the dust jacket because there was something about the dust jacket moving around while you're reading a hardcover book that I just genuinely cannot stand. I also just don't like the sound of it, so I will have a picture of the book cover up here to my right so you know what I'm talking about while I'm talking about it. I figured starting this series out with a Kristin Hannah book would probably be a good idea because all 3 of the books I've read by her are 5 stars, books that I've really enjoyed. So who knows, maybe the first book we read as a part of the TBR tournament ends up being my favorite book out of all of them. That would actually be insane and crazy if this one just ends up winning the whole thing, but who knows? Anyways, The Women is a historical fiction novel. It is set during the time of the Vietnam War. We're following our main character, Frankie, and she comes from a very privileged and well-off family, also a family of war heroes, and they have this wall in their house of all of their family members that have accomplished something, and all the men have a bunch of accomplishments, mainly military, but the women are literally only up there if they've gotten married, which, no. We do not love that. Obviously, Xing that out for everybody right now, because obviously women are way more than just getting married. Sometimes when I read historical fiction books, I need to remind myself that this is a different time, but it's still, it fires me up just a little bit whenever stuff like that happens. It's just so, ugh. Anyways, gonna try not to get into that too much right now, because if I do, I'll keep talking and we're trying to talk about the book. Long story short, Frankie's brother, Finley, ends up joining the military, and she's like, you know what? I'm gonna join the military too. Women can be heroes too. So she goes to be a nurse. For her brother, they had this huge going away party, and her parents and their family and friends were just so proud of him. And so she kind of thought she was gonna get the same treatment, and yet her parents, whenever she told them, they were like, girl, are you crazy? They're confused, almost disappointed, which is crazy, but they just do not want her to go. But she ends up going off to war to become a nurse anyways, and she ends up meeting these other women there, and it's crazy to see how much these women have done for the war efforts and the soldiers, and just getting to see it firsthand, I feel like has more of an impact. You really get to like see fully what is going on and all the things that they are doing behind the scenes. I like how this book is very feminist. It's very women can be heroes too. It's very look what women can do too, and I really do love that, obviously. I love reading about strong, more than capable, courageous women, so obviously I'm loving it so far. Since this is following a nurse's perspective, we do get to see a lot of medical action, and I just recently finished watching The Pit. Absolutely love that show, but I cannot help but think of The Pit whenever I'm reading this book. Not only because they're both medical dramas, but I feel like The Pit, the way that they show things, it's so in-depth. They talk about things a lot. They also talk about the emotions of the people working in the pit, and I just absolutely love that show. And I feel like this is kind of giving me that little medical drama itch that I needed to scratch after finishing The Pit, so I'm glad I'm reading it right now. I feel like this is good timing for me. This book is definitely very heavy. There are gorier, more grotesque things happening, obviously, because it is medical, and also it's obviously going to be heavy because there is a literal war happening. So like, duh, obviously. Also, it's a Kristin Hannah book. Like, her books should literally have on the cover, "You will cry to this. Hope you're okay with that," because you just kind of have to be. And speaking of Kristin Hannah's writing, there's been 2 quotes so far that have really stuck out for me. The first one doesn't have as much meaning as the second one, but it was a nurse, Ethel, talking about her love that has since passed away. And she ends up saying, "He had a laugh that fixed everything." Are you kidding me? I literally ended up tearing up after that. It's not anything crazy or too profound, but it's such a beautiful way to explain having that best friend sort of love. And then the other one, which means a lot more, obviously. The world changes for men, Francis. For women, it stays pretty much the same. And ain't that the truth? I've said this many times about Kristin Hannah's writing, but it is unputdownable. Like, once you get sucked into a Kristin Hannah book, you're in it, and you will be finishing it the next chance you get. This is my 4th book by her, and only from like the 30 pages that I've read so far, I'm already experiencing this again. And I can't really pinpoint it. I don't know exactly what it is about her writing, but it's so rare for me these days to open up a book and just like keep on reading and reading and reading without me having to like lock in and really think about it. Or most of the time I'll read like 5 pages and I'll get like distracted by something else, but I feel like that just doesn't really happen with her books. I am definitely liking it so far though, and I feel like the curiosity of what's gonna happen next is really getting to me, so I just need to jump on back in and keep reading. I'm determined to finish The Women by Kristin Hannah tonight. I have less than 100 pages left, I believe. Yeah, more like 90 pages left, so not that much left to go. The first half of this book versus the second half of this book, they are drastically different. The first one is Frankie actually being a nurse in the why'd I say it like that? I'm sorry. Frankie being a nurse in the Vietnam War and her experience actually being at war. And then the second half is her experience whenever she gets home. She's dealing with a lot of PTSD and she's realizing how hard it is just to slip back into your normal life whenever you've gone through and seen such tragedy. You're getting to see Frankie's struggles as a veteran of the Vietnam War, but also as a woman veteran, and how during that time a lot of people didn't take women veterans seriously because they weren't in combat. They were just saving people's lives, so no big deal. I feel like for some reason as I keep on reading, I'm starting to realize though that I don't really love Frankie as a main character. I definitely have empathy for her and I feel for her, and she's been through a lot, don't get me wrong, but something just isn't clicking in my brain connection wise. It's almost like Kristin Hannah is using Frankie as a vessel to tell the women's side of the story in Vietnam, but outside of Frankie being that vessel, there's not really much else to her character besides a lot of the devastation that she's been through. And it's almost like I'm connecting with the things that she's been through versus the character of Frankie herself. Does that make sense? I don't know. And this is really weird for me because every other Kristin Hannah book I've read, I've rated 5 stars, and I just don't think this one is going to be the same, unfortunately. But because I'm not connecting with Frankie as much as I was really hoping to, I really wish we would have gotten other POVs in this book. Her besties that were also nurses in the war with her, Ethel and Barb, I really wish we would have gotten their POVs. I mean, it's literally called The Women, not The Woman. And I think being able to tell those different stories through different characters' perspectives would have been really cool to see. And not only getting her friend group's perspective, it would have been really cool if we would have just gotten so many different women's perspectives on the wartime. I'm looking over at my fantasy bookshelf right now, and I'm thinking about how sometimes there's just like a third person perspective of like a random group of people, or of just a random side character that you only get once. And I feel like that would have been super cool to see certain things like that instead of just getting Frankie's perspective, because I feel like we're just so limited in the storytelling aspects of how all different types of women were affected throughout the war. I also feel like throughout this book, I've been able to predict a few things, honestly, like way too on the nose. And one of the things that I was like, no way that's gonna happen, ended up happening, and I was honestly shocked. But also part of this book has just made me realize that men suck. Even saying all that, there's still been a few times where I have teared up a little. There's just so many sad and devastating things that have been happening in Frankie's life and in the world that are just very heavy and hard to read. And I think one of my favorite things that Kristin Hannah does in her books is that you get to spend so much time with the main characters. You get to see them for years and years and years of their lives. And because she tells stories that way, she also has the luxury of leaving out things that she doesn't want to put in and making sure the most most important parts are put into the story. I also unfortunately think we're focusing a little bit too much on romantic relationships in this book. Now, obviously romantic relationships are a part of life, but I feel like it's to the point where that is almost overshadowing Frankie's character. And also, I don't want to keep hearing about Frankie's different relationships. I want to hear about the women and what they're doing and how they're experiencing things. And obviously we do get a ton of that, but I feel like a lot of this book is just about the romantic relationships, which I'm just not loving as much because, like I already said, the men do suck. And I also think that 2 of the relationships that she was in were kind of repetitive, and I feel like maybe instead of having both of those, we could have just seen the women being badasses and really cool instead. I just left off on something pretty heavy though. That's why I put the book down earlier today. So I'm kind of scared, but also interested to see what I think of the ending. I finished The Women by Kristin Hannah last night, and I did really like this book. There's no way you can't at least appreciate Kristin Hannah's storytelling and her writing, because it is phenomenal. I think out of this one, however, I just wanted more, and this is not to diminish Frankie's story, but the biggest thing I felt like this book was lacking was other women's point of view. I do think that Frankie's hardships and struggle were important to go through. I was talking with my friend about this literally just like 30 minutes ago, and I was bringing up that Frankie is very privileged for a veteran. A lot of veterans don't have a lot of resources or money or somewhere to go or family to support them. Sorry, this sounds being a little weird right now. We're gonna have to roll with it, but it was from my friend Kristen. Hi, Kristen, if you're watching. She said that Frankie being more privileged than your average veteran, I think, proves that even though she had all these resources and all these things that should make life after war easy, it still wasn't. She still struggled. And I think that's just an important outlook on life in general. Like, you don't know what people are going through. Even if you think their life is one way, it could be completely different. Everybody's going through their own struggles, even if it seems like their life is going well or perfect. And that definitely does apply here. But again, I just really wish we would have seen more women's point of views. And now that I'm finished with the story, I think I started to realize that the reason why I said I wasn't as connected to Frankie in my last update is because Frankie, in my opinion, didn't have a ton to her besides the things that were happening to her. And honestly, I think the way that Kristin Hannah wrote Frankie in that way just played into the idea of her being so naive and young even more, because she doesn't know what else to do. She's on complete autopilot. She made crazy life-altering choices at such a young age that have completely changed everything. And as she's getting older throughout the book, it just takes her time to take agency of her own life. It took her a while to figure out who she was or what she wanted to do, because her head was just so far underwater that she was just trying to live. And I feel like I didn't feel as connected to her while I was reading, because I didn't know who exactly Frankie was, because she didn't know exactly who Frankie was until she really sat back and realized that her life was happening to her. And I don't know, I just thought that this was very different in the way that it was told. Frankie is definitely an unlikable character, but she's also a very real character because she goes through so much in this book. And if one thing's for certain, there is not another author that really sucks me in like Kristin Hannah. I swear to you guys, it felt like I was sitting down for 30 minutes while I finished this book. I think it had been like 2 or 2.5 hours. I didn't even realize that time had passed that much, just because her writing, I've said it so many times before, it is unputdownable. I've just not found another author that makes me feel this way about words on paper. I wasn't distracted in any way. I wasn't looking for my phone. I wasn't trying to see how much time has passed. I just logged in. And her books have also made me realize how much I love the historical fiction genre. Being able to learn about times in history in like a history class versus being able to learn about history firsthand from somebody's perspective, even though it is fictional, but it's from somebody's perspective that is experiencing those things, are two completely different things. It just grows your empathy for the situation and the people that actually went through it. And I never really learned about Vienna Vietnam in school. It just wasn't as talked about as World War II because Americans were ashamed about Vietnam. But like any point in history, it's deeply important to learn about. And also, these books just bring the reality of that point in time to the forefront. Seeing the way that veterans were treated after Vietnam was truly heartbreaking, but especially the way that the women were treated who were saving lives, being told that there were no women in Vietnam, not being recognized for their service and all that they did and all that they went through to do it. And they deserve their recognition just as much as any man. And now that I've read 4 Kristin Hannah books, I've started to realize some common reoccurrences in her writing. One is she can write a female friendship. She writes it like no other, in my opinion. The female friendship between Barb, Ethel, and Frankie, their understanding for one another, the way that they're there for each other at the drop of the hat. That is just true love and friendship, and it reminds me of Firefly Lane by her as well. I love that book so much. The friendship in Firefly Lane is a lot different, a little bit messier than the friendship in this book, but they were both done beautifully and both done in very real ways. I've also realized that Kristin Hannah loves to write a broken, messy man. The men in this book, oh my gosh, the outrage I felt. Every man in this book, besides Henry, he deserves so much better. But the rest of them, brothers, what are we doing? They were pissing me off left and right with their choices. And I'm sure that that was the reality of how a lot of soldiers were in the war. So again, we have the realists of the time, but it was still bothering me. And Lord knows, still haven't been doing that today. So nothing's changed. I do think that the ending came through full circle in a very satisfying way, but at the same time, it left me with a lot of questions asking why things happened the way it happened. It almost felt like a certain relationship didn't come into play earlier in the book so that it could be used as a plot device at the end. And I just found myself questioning that whole situation. I don't want to say too much because I'll give it away. And there were definitely quite a few things about this book that I found pretty predictable, especially the things regarding relationships. But at the end of the day, this is still an amazing book. It was greatly written. I think everybody should read it. Now that I have finished this book off though, let's go ahead and see who is facing off against the women in today's TBR tournament. I started I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger yesterday, and I feel like this was the perfect book to go up against a Kristin Hannah book because she has a blurb on the front. She says, "My favorite novel of the year, heartbreaking, frighteningly prophetic, and defiantly hopeful." So I'm thinking that if anything can go up against my girl Kristin Hannah, it's one of her own favorite books. This book is following our main character Rainey, and it's told as if he is recounting a story of his life. And because of that, the formatting of this book is unique, and I feel like it's something that I normally wouldn't enjoy, but for some reason it's working. Definitely took me a little bit of time to get used to his writing style, but I feel like he's definitely telling a lot more than showing. And there's definitely dialogue between characters, but I would say that most of this book so far has been internal dialogue. And it's interesting because sometimes full conversations will literally just be Rainey recounting it in his own way, or you'll get to see the whole conversation, or it'll be a mix of both. So instead of letting the characters have the conversation and getting to see the dialogue and the way that the characters interact with each other, it's more like this character wanted to plan dinner. They thought dinners were great. Instead of, in quotations, "We should all have a dinner sometime," this person asked. And even though this writing style is a bit odd, I don't know if all of his books are like this, it's kind of growing on me. I'll have to keep you guys updated on how I feel. Whenever I first started the book though, I was kind of like, okay, like this is gonna take a little bit to get used to. Also because our character Rainey is telling you the story of something that happened, there's been quite a few fourth wall breaks which have been very charming. His use of words is also very unique in general. I mean, I don't know how unique this specific example is, but he called someone a book sprite, and that made me laugh for some reason. Like, I kind of love that. I would honestly love to be a book sprite. I guess that's my new aspiration in life. Funnily enough, though, Luke actually chose this book for me whenever we did a little book swap, and he knew that the main character was a musician and his wife was a bookseller. But actually, Luke, listen to this. Did you know that the main character of this book is actually a bass player?
Let's go. Wait, upright bass or electric bass?
It's electric.
Let's go. That is kind of a sweet coincidence because Luke plays bass and I obviously love to read. Because Rainie's wife, Lark, loves to read too. In order to get her attention, so to speak, he started reading all of these books that he heard her recommend to people. So he literally got into reading just to impress her. And at that point, he had only ever heard her voice. He had never seen her face. Like, he is a simp. I don't know if people are still saying that, but he is one simp. Things are a little slow going, and I know that this is technically an apocalyptic novel, and we've been getting little tidbits here and there. He's slowly introducing us to what life is like in the near distant future, where we're starting to see the effects of climate change even more, and society has collapsed even more. There's also been a few mentions of the political scape as well. There are these people called astronauts, and those are the really rich high society who hire people to do certain things. But he hasn't gone into too much depth yet, which is making this futuristic world that he lives in even more mysterious to me. And it makes me want to know more, makes me want to keep reading, which is obviously a good thing. I have about 100 or so pages of I Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger left. And since my last update, the trajectory of the book has changed quite a bit, which I was honestly expecting that storyline of the book a little bit more than what we got at first. But unfortunately, I think I enjoyed the first part of the book more than the storyline we're following now. You're definitely setting sail on an adventure with Rainie, and I definitely like our main character. I feel like that first part was for you to connect with him. He truly has been through so much. He's lost a lot of people, and he's just such a kind person. He always seems like he's gonna do the right thing. The storyline is quite unnerving, but also weirdly hopeful at times. Like, yes, this is a dystopian novel, and I'm very interested to see where we go with the politics of everything, because we definitely have figured out a lot more about the political world that Rainie is living in. I said in my last update that we've been getting bits and pieces here and there, and I think I really like that that's how it's being written instead of it being info dumped on us all at once, because I feel like it's easier to understand everything going on through Rainie's experiences rather than to just be word vomited at. This story is also one of adventure, and it's kind of reminding me of the way that children's stories are told. It definitely has that same whimsical aura to it. This is definitely adult content though. In my last update, I said I was going to update you with my feelings on the writing because I wasn't entirely sure how I felt, and I feel like there is just a little bit of a disconnect for me, which made me think about an interview that Jeanette McCurdy has done. I can't think of one in specific. Honestly, I think she said this multiple times on multiple different forms of media, but she was explaining that the writing style that she enjoys writing and reading is very clean, very simple, and she's not a very big fan of big words writing. She's literally said that whenever authors write that way, it feels like you're being written at, and she just wants to put her hand on their shoulder and be like, "You're enough," which is actually hilarious. And unfortunately, I think this is just one of those times where I need to put my hand on Leif Enger's shoulder and just tell him that he's enough, because he is. I feel like there's definitely a balance of succinct and to the point writing while also writing in a beautiful, flowery way. And I feel like this one is just erring on the side of too flowery, too many big words for me. It's just not balanced enough. And because of that, there's been quite a few moments where the writing itself is kind of taking me out of the story because it's starting to get a little distracting.
My microphone just filled up with storage, so don't mind the audio difference from the last clip to this clip. I feel like the one big thing that is keeping me very curious about this storyline though is the political world, because of the fact that we only know so much. It's very mysterious, and I feel like I'm right on the cusp of seeing what that is about to be all about. And since I'm having so many mixed feelings about this book, I feel like these last 100 pages are going to be pretty make or break for me.
I finished A Cheerfully Refuse by Leif Enger, and I got a lot of feelings, so buckle on up. I didn't share a ton of my thoughts while I was reading this book, which is kind of unlike me, but it's because I wasn't 100% sure on what I was feeling. I feel like I have a lot of conflicting feelings. Going into the last 100 pages or so, I was really trying to have an open mind and trust the process. I was like, maybe all these things that we've been going through and the way that he's been telling the story, maybe it is all gonna click and it's gonna come together. And needless to say, I was quite dissatisfied with the ending. But after finishing this, I feel like the ending and the book overall kind of just feels a little bit messy to me. And it sucks to say that because I think that the premise of this book is very important. Regarding the ending, I just needed more explanation. I needed more of the how, because I did very much understand the why. There was literally a part where he was talking about the things that were happening around them, and the other people that were involved were taking charge of the situation and kind of just did everything, and Rainey was just there like watching and going along with the plan, which is totally fine, but he literally said, I don't know how all of this happened in the moment, it was explained to me later, but then as the reader, we never get it explained to us. Brother what? So to me, that was very frustrating, and that leads me to my other point, which is that there are so many parts of this story that I feel like his writing just got in the way of really giving this dystopian world its full potential in this book. A lot of this book was internal dialogue. I feel like the first part of the book worked for me a little bit more, and the last part just because there was less internal dialogue, but I feel like in the middle there, it was kind of losing me a little bit. It was just making it really hard to focus and kept taking me out of the story. And I feel like overall the plot was a little hard to understand at times because we just didn't have enough context for like anything going on. Dystopian books are inherently political, and that's what makes them the genre that they are. It makes them interesting to read because you're reading about a collapsed society. You're trying to figure out what we can do to not get there, and you're rooting for the characters to get themselves out and build a better world for themselves. And I said in my last update that I was enjoying that we were getting to experience the political world along with Rainey and that we weren't being word vomited at, but I think I could have done with some word vomiting. And that makes me feel even more disappointed because I feel like the political scape of this world had so much potential and it just left me completely unsatisfied because of the fact that we didn't have enough context or explanation. There were also quite a few things about the plot that I found kind of predictable, and the pacing does stay pretty slow throughout the entirety of the book, and then there's these random shocking moments, and I don't know if the pacing was intentional to make those shocking moments stand out more or what the purpose of that was, but I also feel like the chaotic nature of this book and the way it is told kind of does parallel the apocalyptic storyline. And I do think that's a really cool thing for an author to be able to do, but I don't think that makes up for the other ways that this book is lacking. I think the message about how powerful art can be, whether it be music or books, was a great theme throughout the story, and I feel like that was executed very well. The overarching storyline of this book, though, especially politically, even if it wasn't fully explained, was about humanity, love, hope, and what can end up happening if we choose not to look out for each other. And I feel like part of what made this book so gripping at times is that there are things that happen in this book that are happening today or could possibly happen in the future, and it does make it hard to read. It's crazy to see people lose their humanity, but at the same time, it's important to read about because then we can stray away from the things that probably led to what happened in this book and to having a future that's possibly like this. I was expecting more with this book, unfortunately, and I feel like if things would have been a little bit more followed through with plot-wise, I probably could have had a more enjoyable time. But I feel like the craziest thing about this book, though, is that if you take away the politics, it could have just been about Rainey and a sailing adventure story where he's on like a quest. Yeah. Now, this whole video has been leading up until this moment right here where we're going to figure out what book is moving on to the next round of the TBR tournament. And that book is going to be... Crazy cliffhanger, huh? Anyways, comment down below based off of what book you think is going to move on to the next round. For the women, comment down below a palm tree. And for I Cheerfully Refuse, comment down below a sailboat. And I think that's going to be it for me today. I love you guys so much. I hope you're all having an amazing day. And I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, guys. Hello. Do you want the house tour? Do the first, second, third floor. The champion. The champion. Is this painting crooked? I think it's crooked. Maybe I won't do a straight on shot then. I'm the owner of this house. Whoa, 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 yeah. Jibber jabber, jibber jabber. Bye.